Dear Mr. Morlock, I am 14 years old and have always been very interested in blacksmithing and metalwork. I have been watching a lot of YouTube videos and reading a lot, but I think to learn any more I will actually have to try it. I was wondering if you had any advice for me on what is the best way to learn. Thanks in advance. I get emails like this a lot from all kinds of people. Everyone wants to learn more about blacksmithing and they're not sure how to go about it. What I tell them varies case by case, but I'm going to try to give a deeper general answer in this video. The short answer is, if you want to be a blacksmith, then go be a blacksmith. Assemble the tools you need, start hitting metal, and if you don't quit doing it, you'll eventually figure a lot of it out if you don't die of old age first. Long answer. Long answer is, are you sure you want to be a blacksmith? Often when people ask me how to go about learning, I think they're looking for an out. Partly looking for reasons why they shouldn't, wrestling with themselves internally. To my mind, if you want to pursue something, then you'll automatically pursue it. I've gone through 5 apprentices in the last year. Every one of them said that this is what they really wanted to do. They wanted to learn as much about the craft as possible. But not one of them ever came in to just watch and learn, or stayed after hours to work, or came in on their days off. You run into a lot of people like this. They say, "Oh, I've always wanted to do that," or "I've always meant to get into that." And maybe they have meant to, maybe they did want to, but the fact that they didn't means that they wanted other things more. So ask yourself if you really want to do it, or if you just think it's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody thinks it's cool. Then if you really do want to learn, how much do you want to learn? This takes a little longer to sort out, but basically if you can be discouraged from doing it full time, then you should be discouraged from doing it full time. If metalwork isn't something that bubbles up out of the iron in your blood, if it's not something that comes out of the forge fire and grabs you by the heart, then you're probably better off keeping it as a hobby. But this might take a bit of experimenting to see. Either way, you're going to have to acquire some skill, so you just have to see. So how do you acquire skill? It's pretty difficult to serve a traditional apprenticeship now. When I was starting out, it was still standard practice that you'd find someone who could tolerate you and you'd pay them $50 a day just to sweep. In some places, that's still the way it is. I point this out to potential hires when they ask about salary. If you can just find someone who knows and can stand to have you in the shop, just sit there and watch, bug the hell out of them. Try not to get in the way or break anything, but just soak up everything you can. It'll be a while before they actually let you make anything, but the knowledge you gain will be very deep. When I was starting out, I'd have friends who would travel and work for free. You go anywhere, someone would take you in, and you work for food, just trying to learn, get more experience, sleep in the shop. This is harder to do now for a couple reasons, but you can still try it if you're crazy to learn. You can sort of go to school for it. Some art schools run blacksmithing programs. Some places you can even get a master's or a bachelor's in it. I don't know how useful a degree is for making you a good blacksmith, but it's very useful for getting hired at museums or for impressing other people with degrees. There are a bunch of places you can go take a week or weekend course, and a lot of blacksmiths teach out of their shops. This is probably one of the most efficient ways to gain skill. If you have anywhere to work on your own, you can go take a course and then practice what you learned for a few weeks and then go back for another course. If you do that 3 or 4 times a year, then you'll make very rapid progress. It's not cheap, but in a sense you're investing money instead of time. But there's no way around investing time. You could just mess around on your own. It's slow and inefficient, but it's affordable. That's a big thing for a lot of people. And there are so many books and resources now and so much stuff on YouTube that if you put in the hours to study, then you shouldn't really ever get stuck. I wish that half of what's out there now had been available when I started. So how do we learn? We learn by doing. I've thought a lot about this. I didn't do well in school. I barely graduated high school. I went through 2 colleges and a university without earning any degrees. So I did a lot of reading to try and figure out what my problem was. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I did pick up some useful stuff. My generation was taught about learning styles in high school. It turns out there's actually no such thing as a learning style. You'll often hear people say that they learn better with their hands. Everybody learns better with their hands. When you're learning, you're exercising your brain. It's like building a muscle. You're forming new neurons, chains of neurons, and you're connecting to ones that are already in place, reinforcing those connections if you want to keep them. So to really learn, you have to absorb something, connect it to what you already know, and then recall it a number of times if you want to keep it from being overwritten or repurposed. So naturally, when you study a discipline in college, you're exposed to it once, in isolation from everything else, then asked to recall it perhaps twice in a year, and then never again until you graduate. You almost literally could not design a less efficient system for the continuation of knowledge, but that presupposes the point of a university is to be anything but a tuition factory. I digress. In practical terms, that means studying's exhausting. Your brain's using a tremendous amount of energy to build new structures, and you can only do it for about 3 hours. So don't waste all day studying something. Study for a few hours, then practice it. Then go to bed and practice it again the next day. The main investment in education should be time. There's no getting away from that. You can get an overview of the craft in an afternoon, but constant practice is the only way to improve. It's no different than learning an instrument or language or martial art. It's a skill, and the only way to develop a skill is to practice it as often and as many different ways as possible. You have to learn by doing. There's no other way. You can conceptualize, you can visualize, you can hear instructions, but to actually learn, I believe you have to learn through experience. Without experience, you don't have knowledge, you only have assumptions. And when you gain experience, it corrects your false assumptions. And this is important because when you retain a false assumption, everything that you constructed with that assumption is unstable, and eventually it's going to collapse. If it's something minor, the collapse might not be too bad. But if it's a bigger assumption, the consequences can be drastic. It can bankrupt you, it can ruin your life, it can kill you. Wrong assumptions have collapsed entire societies. But in blacksmithing, the wrong assumptions will just make your life more difficult. You'll make knives that get dull, you'll make axes that won't chop, you'll make ugly railings that don't fit. So experience is very important. And experience is not the same thing as repetition. Experience is repetition plus variety. Trying the same thing in different ways, running into as many different problems as possible. When I teach, I try to give as much of what's in my head as possible. Probably too much. But I tell my students to take notes so they can refer back later. Almost none of them do. Blacksmithing is skills-based, and to teach that we work at the anvil. I show you what to do, I tell you what's happening, and then you do it, so there's no disconnect between theory and practice. Something very technical like knives, there's a great deal more information to absorb, but no matter how deep I go into metallurgy and heat treating and blade geometry, all of it you can see happening right in front of you because you're doing it. You're integrating the knowledge into your physical reality in real time. And this is how you teach. It's the basic rule of clear communication. Don't tell, show. You see something being done, and then you act it out. Children do this. We do it intuitively. You have to put a lot of thought and effort into screwing it up. So if you want to learn blacksmithing, then go learn blacksmithing. And to learn it, you have to try it. Most of what we see isn't real. Most of what we know is certainly wrong. But there has to be something hiding under all of our stupid assumptions. We're all stumbling around in the fog. So when we bump into something, we should grab it. We should examine it so we know how to use it, so we can work with it. Fire is real. Iron is real. We take fire and iron and we make something we imagine real. We take an illusion and manifest it into reality. When you forge iron, this is what you're doing. You're changing its form into something that did not exist until you called it into being. And that's how we find our way. We connect the dreams in our head with the objects around us, the objects in the fog, and we can feel our way around. But when we do that, when we get our hands dirty, we can take what we're presented with and fuse it with what's inside us. And then we have a chance to dispel the fog and see a little more clearly.